seminars for this semester. And this one is a little different from the other two because the other two have been very, as you know, very much information oriented. How to get a job, interview skills, dyslexia, very factual. But this one is different and is kind of special because we have two individuals who are really here. Actually, one individual's here. The other one, I'm hoping will be here. I'm sure he'll be here. Two people who are here to just tell you their stories. And the first person I'm going to introduce is Ms. Julie Persky, who was a teacher in Dallas ISD and the surrounding areas for 14 years, 12 years in Dallas. And I got to know Julie because she was a student in my class last semester. And I just love listening to her stories, and so that's what I invited her here to do. So for today, we're just gonna kind of listen to stories about teaching in an urban school, and also from Jose Luis, who was an undocumented immigrant, and so I think some of his story is so powerful. So I'm really just gonna let him tell it to you himself, hopefully. And he, I think, came here around middle school age, illegally, and anyway, he can tell you his story, but it's absolutely inspiring. He's somebody that has been written about in the New York Times, and he's just a great guy. So I hope you'll get to hear him. But I'm going to turn it over to Julie. Thank you.
Hi. There's a lot of y'all. And I will apologize, I teach to my right. So if I forget you, just wave. It's not on purpose, I did it in my classroom too. Anyway, so howdy, I'm Julie. And this is my second semester working on my PhD here in the Urban Ed department. And I love Dr. Garuga's class last semester because she just kind of stood aside and let us talk. And so that's how we got to know each other. And last semester was hard because I love my kids. So if I get emotional, I still miss them. I did teach for 14 years. My first year was in a private school in Channelview. Any of you that are from the Houston area may know that area. And it was different. But that was kind of my test to see if I really wanted to be a teacher. So then I worked in Galena Park for a year, which is actually where I graduated from. And then I moved to Dallas. Anybody from Dallas? Yay! Anybody familiar with Pleasant Grove? I taught 12 years in Pleasant Grove, and it seemed like Pleasant Grove and Oak Cliff were always battling for who could be the toughest. So, but I wouldn't trade any of those years for anything, and so I wanted to kind of just come today and talk with you about teaching, not just in an urban school, but an inner city school. And there's differences, you know, they kind of get lumped together, but urban schools are urban schools because they're huge. And they have, they're close to cities, you know, and that kind of thing, and they have some of the characteristics of inner cities, but they don't have it to the degree that an inner city does. So the amount of homelessness, the amount of poverty, the amount of overcrowding in the schools, it's different in the inner city than it is in a suburb that is urban just because of its size. And so, you know, like, for 6 years I was at Pleasant Grove Elementary, and then I moved down the street about 1.5 miles to Tatum Elementary when it opened. And it was actually an overflow campus for 3 different schools. All 3 schools had been low performing because of science or reading or whatever, not necessarily low performing across the board, but so we were built for 650 kids and we opened with 950. The next year they rezoned and we had 1,200. So we were teaching in stairwells and in conference rooms, and we had one kindergarten class that had 45 students in it with 2 teachers. And so it was a huge challenge. And then the next year they rezoned again and they sent some of the other kids back to a different school, and it was smaller. But we would still have 28, 32, and it fluctuated. My last year that I taught second grade self-contained, I had 23 roster changes. So there was always somebody coming and leaving. And some weeks it would be 3 or 4 kids coming and leaving, and then I'd go a couple of weeks without any changes, and then we would change again. So that level of transience is different when you get into an inner city school versus an urban school. I had kids that lived in their cars. And so, and that's a different story, but anyway. So some of the challenges were overcrowding and funding, and they look at your budget the year before, right? So for next year, they're looking at this year's numbers and they're making projections on how many students they think will be in your school next year. And that's what you get a budget for. So if you end up with twice as many students as what they think you're gonna have, you don't get more money. So if you have 1,200 students, but they budgeted for 650, you have money for 650 kids. So those were some of our challenges. And another challenge was finding teachers that actually wanted to teach in the inner city or in an urban school, that were coming there not just for a couple of years of experience before they could move on, but who wanted to stay there and invest their lives in those kids. And so there was a lot of teacher turnover in my first school. Now my second one, we were a pretty stable group, but it was because the average years of experience was 12 and a half years. So we had teachers that had been in Dallas for a really long time and they weren't going anywhere. So as I was talking with Dr. Varuru, we decided that what I wanted to share with you was things that I wish somebody had told me before I started. I knew I wanted to be in the inner city, but there's things that I wish that I had known. And one of the first ones was that I wish somebody had told me if my kids were struggling, it was because of me. You know, that it wasn't because of what they brought with them, it wasn't their parents, it wasn't they were poor, it was probably because of me, and it was something that I needed to change. And I wish somebody had told me what reteaching meant. That when I was writing my lesson plans, I had all these great little models, guided practice, independent practice, reteach, and I just redo the same thing. And then I couldn't figure out why the kids weren't getting it because I was doing it wrong again. So figure out what reteaching means, because it was a mistake on my part. And then the other thing is, I wish somebody had told me that just because I was the adult in the room didn't mean that the kids were going to respect me. They don't care that I had a college degree. And it was kind of akin to how many of you get upset with your parents and you'd say, why? And they'd say, because I told you so. Did it work for you? It doesn't work for second graders either. And so, especially when they're not your kids. And so I had this one little boy, his name was Charles, and we would just go round and round. And I knew I wasn't supposed to engage in a power struggle with this child, but I couldn't get him to do anything I needed him to do. He'd stand in the middle of the cute little classroom carpet and he would growl at me. He would ball with his fist, and, you know, and I had to fight not growling back. And the kids in the class would just kind of laugh. And so one day, after he had just turned completely red in the face and just at me, I called him over and I said, Charles, what is going on? You know, what happens? What's going on with you when you go home at night? And he just looked at me, you know, because that's kind of complicated for a 7-year-old. And I said, tell me what you do when you go home. He said, I take care of my brother and my sister. Well, I teach second grade. His brother was in pre-K, and his sister was an infant. I said, what do you mean? You help your mom? He said, no. I take care of my brother and my sister. He said, I cook them dinner and help my brother with his homework. I said, well, where's your mom? He said, well, she goes to work. What does your mom do? She sells stuff out of the back of her car. So through the course of the year, we figured out that she was probably a prostitute. We didn't have any proof of that, but she was never at home in the evenings, and he was left taking care of his brother and sister. And the man of the house, because when I asked him where his dad was in prison. So there we go. I don't want to go into stereotypes and say, oh, black kids' parents are all in prison. That's not the point. But with this child, it was. And he was the man of the house. And I expected him to take directions from me. He was used to being the adult. And it completely changed the classroom dynamic between he and I when I realized he wasn't 8. His childhood was gone. And so I quit talking to him like he was a child and started talking to him more like I would talk to an adult, and it changed everything. And that's just one of the, it was amazing to me what happened when you got to know your kids. There was a 4th grade student that year, it was my first year at Pleasant Grove, and one of my 4th grade teacher friends and I were talking, and I didn't know what to do with Charles, and I was telling her, you know, what do I do? And she was telling me about this child that had, he kept falling asleep, and she fussed at him for falling asleep in her class. And she finally stopped him one day and said, what's going on? I'm just tired. and we had parent conferences. Any of y'all familiar with parent conferences? So some schools schedule them where, like start in the middle of the day, the kids go home early, but Dallas did theirs in the evening, so they start from at 4 and go until 8, and by the time we get out of the building, it'd be close to 9. So this teacher was leaving one night after parent conferences, and she saw the child riding his bicycle down St. Augustine Road with the laundry basket balanced on the handlebars of his bicycle. He'd gone home and he'd given his siblings their dinner, helped them with their homework, given their baths, put them to bed, and then he was going to do the family's laundry after class was over, because that's what it takes for their families to make it. It takes everybody's work. And so I had to learn that they didn't respect me just because I was the grown-up. They respected me when I could respect them where they were. And then I wish somebody told me I was going to make mistakes. I'm a perfectionist, and I thought I was just going to go in there and I was going to make a difference and everybody was going to be happy and it was going to be great. Yeah, no. So I had a really great principal that I look back now at some of the things that she would say, and it makes so much more sense 14 years later. But she required reading logs for every class at every grade level. And at this point, we were all still self-contained, even up into 5th and 6th grade. And I would just fuss. These little girls, one of them in particular, that she never had her reading log, ever. And we were supposed to give a grade. It was a homework grade. And they were supposed to read to their parents 15 minutes, and then their parents were supposed to read to them for 15 minutes, and whatever. It didn't even have to be a parent, somebody at home that they read to. And she never had it signed, unless we had been to the library. And then she'd get it signed once, and that was it. And so I fussed at her and fussed at her and fussed at her. Where's your reading log? And every 6 weeks, she's like failing reading because you didn't have a reading log, And I said, where is your reading log? She said, I don't have any books. I said, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Everybody's got something at home that they can read. If it's a newspaper, if it's a magazine, I don't care what it is, read something. But Ms. Persky, I don't have any books at home. I said, if you lie to me next time, I'm going to call your mom. So I called her mom, and they don't have any books at home because they move a lot. And this was, again, in my very first year teaching in the inner city. But the degree of transience that some of my kids had been in 8 schools by the time they came to 2nd grade. And it was because they'd skip out on the leaves or they moved, and then like a few years later, even at Tatum, we had, with the year that I had 23 student transfers in and out, part of it was students were still resettling after Katrina. And so we had a huge influx in our student population that year. And then they'd stay with us, and then they'd move somewhere else because they weren't settled yet. And so even years later, we had kids that still weren't settled, and we still had Katrina victims that were coming into our school. So I called them on, they didn't have any books. And I at least was able to apologize to the child and tell her I was sorry for humiliating her in front of the class and accusing her of lying, but the damage was done. And then I quit asking for reading logs. If they didn't turn them in, I didn't grade them. I mean, I turned it into an extra credit assignment, or I didn't grade them for that 6 weeks or something, because I couldn't penalize the children for something that was way beyond their control. And I did the same thing with, you've probably seen the little color change things for discipline. If you get in trouble, you have to go change from blue to green, and then if you end up on red, it's really bad. I quit using those too, because those little conduct things would go home every day, and then they come back not signed. Because who wants to show their mom that they got a red face? Well, or they'd show their mom, and the mom wouldn't do anything, but she wouldn't sign it, and you end up penalizing the children for something that they didn't. Yes, they had control over behavior in the classroom, but so did I. So how's it? It's a subjective thing. Was it worth giving them a red face and worth getting them in trouble at home? And some of them, after you saw how they came back the next day, I didn't want to send red faces home anymore. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay. Give yourself permission now to make mistakes, because it's going to happen, and you can learn from it, or you can beat yourself up over it, but at least, you know, don't do like me. I didn't even know I was gonna make mistakes. That's just not my fault. I can't help that she's not doing her reading. I learned probably after I'd been in the classroom for 4 or 5 years that making mistakes in front of your kids is a good thing, because they get to see that you're human, and they get to see that you're not the keeper of all knowledge. So when they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, tell them you don't know the answer, but let's go find out. So you find a book, teach them about encyclopedias. They don't know what those are anymore. You know, we had computers in our classrooms, but there weren't enough for all the kids to use, so we didn't use them very much. But what I would do is I would go to the teacher station and we would look it up there, and it was on the in-focus machine, and they could see there, and we'd all find the answers together. But it was important that they knew that I didn't have all the answers. And it took a whole huge burden off of me when I realized I didn't have to have all the answers. That I was gonna make spelling mistakes on the board, that I was gonna mispronounce words in a book, and that I would do some addition wrong. So, you know, and then when they catch you in those mistakes, they're like, oh, you made them, and look, you did that wrong. It empowers them because they saw something. And so it's like, oh yeah, I did that on purpose. No, you didn't. And so there's this other story about books. Did y'all ever go to book fairs? I love books, y'all. That's my biggest addiction. Dr. Baru can attest to that. And so I have a book addiction. And so when the book fairs would come, I couldn't wait, you know. And keep in mind, we're in the inner city. They didn't have books at home, so I'm thinking this is a great opportunity for my kids to get books. So I'd send home the flyers, and they'd come back with all the little check marks on the books that they wanted to get. And they'd say after lunch or when it was our book fair time, can we go to the book fair now? Can we go to the book fair now? And we'd go to the book fair. I'd send them in their groups, and they'd come back with a bookmark or a pencil. Why didn't you get a book? Oh, I didn't have enough money for a book. And then it started, you know, after years of that, I started to realize that they didn't have money for books. They'd get all excited, and they'd go in there and they'd pull a book off the shelf and they'd put it back, and then they'd pull another book off the shelf and they'd put it back, and then they would do that 3 or 4 times, and then they'd go get a bookmark, but they didn't have a book. And so I turned that into an incentive too, that if they had done all their homework or whatever, that we would go, and our librarian started figuring out that our kids didn't have money to purchase books, and so she would she worked really hard with Scholastic to get the half price books or to get the clearance books, and so we always had tables where the books were 50 cents or $1, or buy one get one half price. And so it made it where I could go with the kids and say, okay, you can get this book, and then I could get another one for somebody else without having to pay the full cover price for both of them. And that's what we did, because I couldn't handle that my kids didn't have books, because they get so excited. They love going to the library, but they had to give those books back. And so the last time that I took my kids to the book fair, they were all sitting in the floor with their books, and when we got back to the classroom, they asked me where did I want them to put the books, because they didn't realize they were going to get to keep them. And so books are a big deal, even if they don't have money, they want books, they want to read. And so if you go to work in Dallas, Half Price Books has a warehouse that you can go and you take your boxes, and you can take anything. It's the stuff that they're not going to sell in their stores. So you can just take boxes, and that's how I started my first classroom library, was I would go to Half Price Books and get all these books that, because I couldn't have afforded to just start a shelf full of books, but Half Price Books gave them away. So there are ways to get books for your classrooms. Find library sales, and then when you get them for free, you don't mind giving them away, you know what I mean? And you see what a difference it makes to the kids when you put a book in their hand and it's theirs. It's huge. Okay. I wish somebody had told me what an incredible amount of power I was going to have in the lives of my kids. You think that you're going to go in and you're going to teach them to read, you're going to teach them to write, and you don't realize all the other things that you're teaching them that have nothing to do with academic content. And so I think it's really easy to get so wrapped up in, we have paperwork that's due, and we have lesson plans to write, and we have copies to make, and we have tests to prepare for, that we forget the humanity of our kids and how they feel and the frustrations that they bring to school with them, and how much the things that we say touch them. And so I was telling Dr. Baruru, one of my very clearest memories of early childhood years was in first grade. I had cut my finger, and I had been taught, probably like you guys were, that you don't interrupt when adults are talking. So I'm standing there in the line, and my finger's bleeding, and my teacher was standing across the hall talking with the second grade teacher, and I walked over, and I was holding my finger, and I was running down my finger, and I stood there, and I was waiting for her to ask me what I needed. And instead of asking me what I needed, she said, "What do you want, Nosy? Go get back in line." Now, I was a super compliant kid, not so much now, any of you that know me now know, but when I was little, I was terrified, so I'm standing there and I'm scared because I didn't want to be in trouble because I'd hurt myself, and she yelled at me instead of helping me. So I stood in the line crying with my finger bleeding, and but for me in my classroom, I want to tell you about Luis. Luis was this teeny tiny little Hispanic boy, but he had the most magical light in his eyes. Oh my God, he was an amazing kid. And he didn't learn to write his name until his first time through second grade. He started reading his second time through second grade in my class. And so the first day that he actually read more than 2 words to me, and it was a full sentence, and he knew what he had read, and it was so exciting. We went all the way around the building to all of his other teachers, to the principals, to everybody. We made a huge deal out of the fact that he made it through a first grade book, even though it was his second time through second grade, because for him it was huge. And what that did, he came back with a bunch of stickers and erasers and treats and all kinds of stuff, and he was so excited because he worked so hard anyway, and he was one of probably the most incredibly motivated children I've ever met with, or ever had in my class. He had some difficulties, and so we were in the process of having him tested to see if he needed sped services, and I'm assuming that you guys are to the point now that you know what response to intervention and progress monitoring is. And so this was before that. Before we had progress monitoring and response to intervention, they would give the kids an IQ test, and they would look at their classroom performance. And there had to be a 16-point spread between their performance and their IQ level. If they didn't have 16 points between that, then they were said to just be a delayed learner or a slow learner, and they did not qualify for help. They went back to their classroom, and the teacher was kind of left to her own defense there, to figure out what she could do to help the child, because he wasn't going to get any extra support. And so Luis didn't qualify by 1 point. So 1 point lower on his IQ or 1 point lower on his performance, and he would have gotten some extra services, but he didn't qualify. So I went to the kindergarten teachers and the first grade teachers, and I was pulling in as much stuff as I could to help him, and he would sit there. I mean, he might have 10 fact family problems. This one particular day sticks out. I had given them fact families, and they had a box with 4 squares, and each square had to have one of the fact family members in it, and he worked all day long to get through 6 of them until he had every one of them right. And he'd come back, and his eyes would be all lit up, and I could check off the ones. Instead of just checking off the whole family, I would check off each individual problem that he got right so that he didn't feel completely defeated when he had to go back and work some more. And he would work all day. He worked all day on that one. But it was like that every day with him. He didn't quit. And he'd come in with this magical light every day. And he loved art. He had an uncle that was an artist. And so he'd bring him his art projects from school, or his art projects that his uncle had been working on. He was really, really gifted artistically. And you could see that coming out even as he was just, a 7-year-old, 8-year-old child. And it was really hard for me to let Luis go to 3rd grade because I knew that he'd be faced with the TAC test. I knew he wasn't going to get any extra support. I offered his mom to tutor him with my 2nd graders and that kind of thing, but they wanted him in 3rd grade tutoring because of the TAC test and stuff. So I was walking down the hall one day, and his teacher was standing in the doorway, and I could see him, and he turned around in his chair, and his eyes lit up with this, I can't even begin to describe it. He was just this light on his face, and he turned around and he waved at me, and I said, "Hey, Luis," just kind of whispering into the doorway. I said, "How's it going?" And his teacher turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Luis, that boy can't do nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do with him. He doesn't belong in here." And I watched his face. And the shutters came down and the light went out, And unless it was just the two of us, the light was gone. I started seeing him in the office every day or two on a referral. He flunked 3rd grade, he flunked again in 5th or 6th grade. He would have had a hard time passing anyway because he had difficulties. But what she said to him, the way she said it, destroyed him. And I don't know how you get that back. You know, when it's gone, I don't know how to get it back, because psychology says that it takes like 11 positives to reverse 1 negative. And so when I was always careful, when I had to fuss at a child, I would find a way 11 times that day to come back and say, you know, you did this really well. I really thank you so much for participating this way, because I didn't want them to go home and only have this 1 negative thing in their head. And always I had that look on Luis's face, y'all, I don't think it's ever going to go away. That the look on his face when he was smiling and waving at me, and then 30 seconds later, the look on his face when it was gone. That was one of the most powerful and devastating moments for me in my teaching career, because I absolutely saw what happened to the kid when he had his feet knocked out from under him. You know, he was giving it everything he had, and it wasn't enough to make his teacher happy. And so we have an incredible amount of power. And so as you walk, you know, whether you end up in an inner city or whether you end up in a suburban classroom, just know that you have that. Or every kid comes to the classroom and they want to please you. They love you before they walk in the door. They can't wait to get to school and see you. And they want desperately to please us. I wish somebody could tell me that all the kids aren't the same. That we teach who we are. So me growing up white, middle class, working class in Texas, anybody in here Southern Baptist? I grew up Southern Baptist. You bring all of that stuff to the classroom with you. We have unconscious biases that come across our kids, whether you make eye contact with them or you don't make eye contact with them, whether it's you're Baptist and you're not Muslim, and you unconsciously dismiss what's important to the Muslim child, or you unconsciously dismiss what's important to the Jehovah's Witness child. My first couple of years in Dallas, I had several kids that were Jehovah's Witnesses, and their parents would try really hard to make sure that we knew without it interrupting our classroom stuff. They didn't say the pledge. They couldn't celebrate winter holiday parties, or we called them Christmas parties up until a few years ago. They couldn't do those things. And so it's really, really easy to let your biases to come through. And so this is another one of my favorite stories. I've been teaching in Dallas for 6 years, and when TAMU opened, I moved down there and had the most incredible boss in the world. And 2nd grade was assigned the PTA program for February, which is African American History Month. Now, I don't understand why we only teach African American history one time out of the year. It should be like in our classrooms all the time. But we were supposed to do a program for the PTA meeting. And one group of the teachers did their thing together and left Stephanie and I to do our own. And so she did a poem or a song about the presidents, Washington and Lincoln. And I taught my kids, they memorized a little poem about George Washington Carver, because they didn't want to spend time on people that they already knew. They know Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and the big names. So I wanted to spend time with the scientists that looked like them, that had made huge contributions to our society, to the world actually. And so they learned the poem, and they stood up on the stage and they said it for everybody. And we were all so happy, and I got to work the next day, and there was this email in my inbox that accused me of being a racist. Now, this is probably a good place to say that in 12 years in Dallas, I only taught 5 white students. My classrooms were always about half and half, African American and Hispanic. So truthfully, if I was racist, probably wouldn't have been teaching in that classroom. But people don't know me. They don't know that. And so this teacher on our campus has sent this email, and it was absolutely devastating to me. I cried for 2 weeks. I talked with my boss, and she said, you didn't do anything wrong. The program was great. But I still struggled with it, because inside I walked home scared of what people thought, because if this one teacher thought that about me, what did the other ones think about me? And so I would pray, and I just pray, Lord, I don't understand. How could they call me a racist? I'm colorblind. how could they call me racist? I don't see color. And so about 2 weeks after this, I'm still just frantic every day, crying on the way to work. And I love my job. I mean, it was a great school, but I was terrified because the last thing that I needed or wanted was for anybody to think that I was biased or discriminatory in any way against my kids. And so I'm walking down the hall and I'm thinking, it was like, and I tell you, it was 9:05 in the morning. I was on my planning period and I was headed to the teacher's lounge and I'm praying because I didn't want to see anybody in the hallway. You know, I'm just like, I don't want to have any problems with anybody. And so I'm like, Lord, I don't understand. How can anybody call me this? And as I'm walking into the teacher's lounge, I was like, I got slapped in the head and said, so it comes to me that I hadn't thought about the color of anybody else's skin because I never had to think about the color of my own. And what that means in this society, y'all, is that we still have an incredible amount of privilege. And so when we're in our classrooms, we have to think about the culture of the students that we have. Because just because color is not a big factor for me, it doesn't stop me from seeing people for who they are. It doesn't mean that for them that they have the same privilege of saying, oh, I'm colorblind, because they've experienced life totally different than me. They've experienced a biased society, a discriminatory teacher before me, or their parents had teachers that discriminated against them, or even still with my kids, a lot of them have multi-generational homes that they lived in. So they had grandparents, aunts, uncles, and their moms, they all lived, you know, together or next door to each other. And so they had 60 years of educational influence. And when they came to school, they didn't trust the white teacher. So for me to say, I don't see color is a privilege. And it meant that I wasn't always sensitive to their cultural differences. They're not all the same. You know, white kids can sit in a class, and this is a stereotypical example. So we can sit in a class and we're quiet and we're very independent, but other cultures are really, really, really communal. And so I learned that just because they were standing up at their seats or they were laying on the floor, it didn't matter because they were engaged and they were learning. And then a couple of years ago, I had this other experience. I would never have thought that I would encounter gay children in my class because I taught second graders. But we had a little boy that wore his jewelry to school. He brought his sister's purse to school. A couple of years ago, we had a little boy who came in and said that he had two mothers, and the kids in the class laughed at him. So I'm not trying to scare you, but just know that those things come up and that our biases can get in our way. If you come from a background that gay is bad, then it's really easy to just ignore what the kids say, to blow it off, to say, oh, don't talk like that. And so you stop the problem that's happening in the class, but you don't do anything to validate this child that's just been violated. And so we have to kind of know those things. It comes through with socioeconomic bias and language bias and all those things. I can't tell you how many teachers I would tell, you know, our black kids speak their African American vernacular. And the teacher says, you can't talk that way, or you have to only speak English, and what that takes away from a kid. So I wish that somebody had told me that we weren't all the same and that it was okay to not be the same and be sensitive to that. I'm running out of time. I thought I was going to have a hard time filling up 30 minutes. So the last thing, and I can stop with this, is that relationships matter. I wish somebody had told me that relationships would be the absolutely most critical thing in being a teacher. Relationships with my students, relationships with their parents. We need their support. Relationships with the parents give you an inroad with the kids, and it changes everything. You don't have discipline problems when you have relationships with the kids because all they want is to make you happy anyway. They're motivated to learn that way, and I could keep going with stories about, you know, I had one parent a couple of years ago that I'm not a proponent of retaining children, but there was this one little girl who had come from such just her biological mother was schizophrenic, and she had episodes a lot, and the little girl was in transition between her aunt was adopting her, and she was really struggling academically because of all the things that she'd gone through. She didn't have an intelligence issue, she just hadn't had adequate exposure. And so we talked about retaining her and how, and just to reinforce her foundation before she went to third grade and had to try to take TACs. And she finished, she went on to middle school last year and was commended performance and everything and perfect scores in reading. And so it happened to work for that child. And that mom would come to see me every time she was on campus. She had 2 or 3 other children there. And she said, when I tell people about TAMU, I tell them about you because you cared about my kid. And so that's what it comes down to, y'all. If you love your kids, they're going to learn. Because if you love your kids, then you're going to do the things that it takes to reach them. I had teachers that kept saying, I got moved around every year at Tatum. I would do 2nd grade self-contained, 2nd grade math science, 3rd grade math science, then it was 2nd grade self-contained, and then I did 2 years in the science lab, and I taught kinder through 5th grade there, different grade level every day. And these teachers would come and say, you really found your niche in science. And it would make me so mad because I'm a reading teacher. I'm a writing teacher, I don't even like math, and I was teaching math, and, but with the science, all the teachers came with their kids to the science lab and said, oh, you really found your niche. And one of them, the wrong one, said it one day. And I got really tired of hearing teachers say, I'm not a science teacher, or I'm not a math teacher. You're there to be what your kids need you to be. And if that means that you have to learn something, I hate math. I hate math. I can't tell you how upset I was when my boss told me, you're going to teach math, 2nd grade math and science next year. I was like, no, I'm not. And she said, no, you're going to teach second. No, I'm going to teach reading and writing because that's what I teach. You're teaching math and science. And then on top of that, y'all, she made me loop up with those kids the next year and teach 3rd grade math and science. And because we'd gotten kids from 3 low-performing schools, we were low-performing for 2 years. So our 3rd year open, which is the year she moved me to 3rd grade, we were being reconstituted. And teachers were losing their jobs, and I'm like, this is so not fair. And but the thing of it is I had a choice. And the choice was to learn to teach math or change schools. Because I didn't have a choice not to teach the kids. They were dependent on me. So this teacher says, you found your niche in science. And I'm like, no, the kids are my niche. The kids are my niche. Because if the kids are your niche, then you're going to do what you have to do, right? And she just looked at me and I said, because I can't stand around like you and just say that I'm only going to teach reading. And that year this particular person was self-contained. She wouldn't teach science. I'm not a science person. Science and math teachers, are any of you guys doing just math or just science? That's all you're going to do? So you can't go into your math class and go, I'm not going to teach science because I majored in math. You have to teach science. And this lady wasn't teaching science. And so she says that to me, and I looked at her and I said, no. I said, because we don't get the privilege of deciding what we'll teach. The subject matter. We're teaching kids. We signed up for this. They did, and this is it. I'm going to stop. They don't ask for us. We're the ones that make the choice to teach where we teach. So if you don't want to teach in an urban school, don't. And that's the best I can tell you, because if you don't want to be there, the kids know it, and you all end up suffering for it. They get assigned to their schools by their attendance zone. They get assigned to their classrooms by the attendance clerk. They didn't ask for me. I made the choice to be in that school every year. So it was my job to make sure that I was telling them or teaching them and learning what I needed to learn so I could give them what they needed. And nobody ever told me my kids would be my heroes. That our nightmares are the realities that a lot of my kids live. And they got up and come to school every day. Sometimes it was just to come to school to eat, but they got up and they came every day. Sometimes they came with no shoes, but they came to school every day. And you have to admire a kid that's got so many things against them, and they get up and they do it again every single day. They take care of their brothers and sisters, and they get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and they show up every day. So, with all of that said, I want you guys to go and have fun, because teaching is like the most amazing thing you can do. You get to watch people change, you get to watch them grow, you get to watch them get excited over things that they didn't know before they were in your class. And you get to know that, whether you see them or not, after they leave, that you've done something that matters, that's a legacy for you. And some of them come back. My Elijah's he's graduating from high school this year with honors, and he's playing football. He wants to go to Oklahoma and play for the Sooners, and he's got all these things going on. He came to my class in 2nd grade with his jersey on. He knows in 2nd grade that he wanted to go there. And it's with a lot of hard work and working with his parents, he gets to do that. And so he still brings flowers. Last year he brought flowers because I got Teacher of the Month, so they brought flowers to the school. And those are the kinds of things, y'all, that it makes the hard work pay off. You know, there's horror stories too, but it makes the hard stuff is worth it when they come back and they've graduated from high school and they've made it and you were part of that. So have fun. Thank you so much. We're gonna get to hear from Jose Luis, and I can't wait.
I knew I wouldn't leave today without crying. I already have.
I made it through without crying.
You did good. We're going to introduce our second speaker, and again, an amazing set of stories. I'm just going to turn it over, because you're a much better storyteller than I am.
Well, howdy.
Howdy.
All right, going howdy.
Howdy.
All right, well, thank you so very much for giving me the opportunity to be here with y'all today. It's a little crazy if I was to tell you how I actually ended up here. It didn't happen whenever Dr. Rivero asked me to come. It happened many years before Dr. Hammer's class, or whenever she asked me to share my story. And whenever I talked about Nemo and that my story is really the idea to keep swimming, even when you get shot twice in both of your arms. Even if you get stabbed while you go to school and you're 9 years old in a bus by gang members. Even if it means to see your mother leave your country with your little sister and not see her for 2 more years. Or even if it means to be a victim of gang violence in the streets of Honduras, San Pedro Sula, the #1 capital of violence in the world. Very dangerous place. So I want to say thank you for having me. I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to share my story, but more importantly, to be able to share the stories of students across the nation. I travel the country talking to students from all over the parts of the world. And what they tell me, what I ask them is, what do you want teachers to know? What do you want teachers to know before they get into the classroom? And that's what I want to talk about. I have composed my story around my students and around their issues that matter, and around the issues that you're going to be facing, because I face, because they face, because we face, because we are humanity, and if there is something that we do have in common, is that humanity. So I want to say thank you. It's beautiful to see a few faces, very familiar, very good friends in the crowd, amazing teachers that I know are going to make a beautiful difference, and that I know that maybe one day one of your students is going to stand in front of a crowd of teachers and say, thank you. So that's what I want to say to you. I want to say thank you for making the decision of changing my life. Thank you for making the decision to not get a lot of money, but to be able to get a lot of praise from your kids. Maybe thank you for having the opportunity that maybe you don't have kids yet, but yeah, whoever said you don't have kids, it's wrong, because you're probably going to have about 100 of them. Thank you for taking the chance and the challenge and the opportunity to go through college with the idea that education is an easy career. Thank you for taking the challenge of saying, you know what? Whenever somebody said that the work is a lot, but the hands are few, and that we needed people to do the work, and you said, here I am, thank you. Because students like me made it. Because students like myself, after being homeless and sleeping underneath the bridge, I can now say I'm a 4.0 graduate student, second year at Texas A&M University. Because of people like you. Because of people like you who have said, you know what? I'm not just a teacher. I am a student. And my teacher is not a regular professor, but my greatest teacher is life. Because you see, life is a beautiful teacher. Life is also a tough teacher. Because life, what it does is that it first gives you a test, and it then gives you a lesson. But we have been taught otherwise. And the other thing that I want to say before I start sharing my story is that one of the things that I want to say thank you for is because you understand that before you reach your students' minds, you have to first reach their hearts, and I want to say thank you for that. Day one, I remember whenever I was 5 years old and I came into my mom's room. At the age of 5 years old, maybe I should have been in pre-K, maybe I should have been playing around, maybe I should have been in a room playing Xbox at the age of 5 years old, but I didn't. I came to my mom's room and I wondered why my mom was crying. I wondered what had happened to her. I wondered why my mom was in the floor holding my younger brother at the age of 3 years old, and I wondered what had happened. I said, Mom, why is Noecito purple? Why can he not move? Why can't I say, let's go play? Why can't he move? At the age of 5 years old, I witnessed firsthand how my brother passed away in my mom's arms. Because we didn't have a couple of bucks, a couple of pennies to take my little brother to the hospital. Because poverty was so real to me that my brother passed away due to an asthma attack. At the age of 5 years old, I remember walking in and saying, Mom, what happened? And I remember my mom saying, everything is going to be okay. Just know that now you have a guardian angel. And as I stand before with you today, every time I speak, I like to say we. Because I know I'm not alone. Because whenever there's darkness outside, or whenever I'm around darkness, or the idea that there is a tunnel and that at the end of the tunnel there's light, I don't believe in that. I don't think that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We haven't realized that there is no tunnel and that we are actually surrounded by light, and what we see at the end of that tunnel is actually darkness, and we need to start appreciating the things around us because they are not negative. They are positive. The things that happen to me are not negative. The things that happen to our kids are not negative. They're just part of the process that are building us up to be great men and great women and great people in community from the GOBT. There are people that are going to be able to make this world a better place because you and I are going to be gone and they will take over. So thank you. I remember walking in at the age of 5 years old and I wondered, my brother had passed away. I wonder if things would get worse, and I wonder what my generation, my ancestors have seen, and I was wondering why was I being punished for it, and I wonder if things would get worse. And I remember at this age of 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, was starting at 7. I would go up to a stoplight and I would grab a bucket of water, and I would grab a couple of rags and a little bit of soap, and at the age of 6 years old, I would work for half a day at intersections and at lights, and I would clean windshields. And I would ask people for money so that I can buy a piece of bread, but mainly alcohol for an addicted father. I'm sorry, I'm my slave master. I wanted to be able to provide for my family because I was the man of the house, but yet in the house, there was a man defined by the society of violence, defined by the society that a man is greater than a woman, and by the idea that a man, the more you hit her, the stronger you are. And that's the environment that I was raised around. That was the idea that I was told about my little sister, about my mom, and about my community. I was told that if a man did X, Y, and Z, then you became a man, and if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, you were not a man. So I did what men did. I worked the streets and I cleaned windshields. And I sold candies at stadiums. And I sold drinks in stadiums. But I also remember at the age of 8 years old that I went up to a wood store, and I just bought a couple of pieces of wood, and I grabbed a hammer and I grabbed a couple of nails, and I built myself a little small case, and in that case, in there I put rags and shoe material and my heart and my family's hopes, and I headed to parks Honduras, and I shined people's shoes at the age of 8. The age of 8. And I walked around businesses and I said, can I have a piece of your chicken? Can I have a piece of your plantains? Can I have a piece of you so that I can be happy? Because we celebrated when happiness was around it. We celebrated when suffering wasn't too strong because this idea of happiness was a different language. We celebrated when things weren't as tough because we were thankful that we didn't get punched 3 times by my father in the face. We were thankful whenever my brother, when he had 37 stitches in his arm. We were thankful after the day that we found out that my father grabbed a machete and a gun and persecuted my mother. And hit my brother on his hand. To the point that he has stitches. To the point that he has a mark that he will never forget. But yet he has reversed for love. He has to reverse it for the idea that we are not perfect and he is nobody to judge. And I wonder if things would get worse at the age of 7, at the age of 8. And I wonder, what had I done? What had my generations before me? What was our sin? What went wrong? And how could I fix that? How can I break this cycle that my future generation doesn't have to go through this? Because it's simply not fair. It's simply not fair for somebody to go through that. It's simply not fair for me to be able to see my little brother pass away at the age of 5. It's just not. It doesn't matter what my generations before me did. It doesn't matter what I had done. It's just not fair for me to see that. It's just not fair for me to, instead of being in the first grade, to be able to be in a bar shining shoes. It's just not fair for me to humiliate myself so that I can buy a drink for my father. It's not fair. And that's okay, because life is not fair. It's not about fairness, but it is about what's just. It is about what's right. It is about how can we change people's lives. So that's why I say thank you, because I know that there will be another Jose Luis, there will be another Luis that will sit in front of your classroom and will see that light in you, and they will know that you are that tunnel. They will know that you are that way out. They will know that you are that inspiration. And the reason why I speak this way is because whenever I saw my teacher, I saw tunnel. I knew that I could get out, and I knew that through her passion and through her words and through her actions and through her perseverance and dedication, but mainly through her love, I had a place. I had a place that was not there for me because I never knew where I belonged. Because when I was home, I suffered. When I was in the streets, I suffered. And whenever I was in school, I suffered because I had a lot of cognitive problems because I couldn't understand. I actually had to be taken to a psychiatrist many times. But how shouldn't I have the opportunity to receive help? But it is Honduras. And it is a place with very minimal resources. And I remember at the age of 11 years old, year 1998, a Category 5 Hurricane Mitch destroyed Honduras. And one of the memories that I have is that I remember being on top of a roof holding next to my little sister, being afraid that the river was going to swallow her. And I was afraid that I had already seen and witnessed the death of my brother, and I was about to witness the death of my sister, so I held on to her. And I grabbed her with twice the strength as if my brother was with me. And I said, "You ain't going nowhere because I love you. And I don't want to lose you, and I want to be with you, and I want to be able to raise you, and I want to be able to tell you that it's okay to live this kind of life, but that we have to work towards righteousness and towards trust and towards what's right, and this is just not right, so let's change it, so let's hold on to each other, let's not be weak, because on the other side of this river, there's our mother crying, and she needs our help." I remember when I was on top of the roof, a firefighter throwing a rope to me and saying, "Hold on to it and tie yourself and your sister to it so that we can save you and so that we can make you come to shore and that we can help give you the opportunity to hug your mom and to feel love." We had to go through channels to feel love. We had to go through people and through ropes, and this is not just a rope. This is the idea that we had to grab onto something to believe that even though whenever we went through the shadows of death, or even whenever we went through the midst of the water, that we were going to be okay, that we were going to make it, that we were going to survive, because our desires to live were stronger than the desires of death. And I don't mean spiritual death or morality death. I mean physical death, as in like I would be that body that I saw when I was on top of that roof. I was helpless, like as if I was that body that I saw whenever I walked the streets shining people's shoes because of gang violence. I wonder if that was going to be me or if that was going to be my sister. So I wondered, what had I done? What was my sin? What was my generation's sin? And at the age of 20 years old, Hurricane Mitch destroys my house, and my family and I, we become homeless. And we start living in the streets of Honduras, just walking around and asking people for food. But at the same time, every time we got a single penny, there was a man that came around. There was a man that came around to beat up my mom. There was a man who came around who said that my mom was a nobody and that the only reason why she existed was to compliment him. And it was not a supplementary formula, that it was only about him and that it wasn't about her, that even though he told her that he would protect her, he actually beat her and abused her. So he didn't do what a man was supposed to do. So he became our slave owner and treated us as if we were his property, forgetting that I was his son and that my sister was his daughter and that my mother was his wife. He treated me as if I was a piece of money that would buy him a drink that was messing up his present, that had messed up his future, and that was messing up his life, and our lives, and the lives of my family. So I wonder if things would get worse, but how could they? Whenever I was 13 years old, in year 1999, my mom made the decision to run away from Honduras and to grab my little sister who was 5 years old and to come to the United States. Yes, my mom came to this country without proper documentation, not because she wanted to break the law, not because she was a criminal, not because she was an illegal alien, but because she did exactly what the mother of Jesus Christ did whenever Jesus was taken into threat by King Herod and said that we're going to kill every baby under the age of 2. What did she do? She brought her baby and her wife and her husband. And they moved to Egypt and they lived there for about 2 years. Finding a place where Jesus could be safe, finding a place where he could be protected, and that's exactly what my mother did. So I don't understand when I see the media, my mom being called a criminal. I don't understand what it means that my mom is an illegal alien. My mom is a hero. My mom is the reason why I'm speaking to you, because if she didn't come to this country, you'll probably be seeing myself as a number of the death statistics in Honduras. Not because I was a bad kid, but because I was a kid that was surrounded around that environment. So my mom came to this country by herself. She walked, she swam, she slept underneath trains. She made it to this country in 4 days to give my sister an opportunity to leave and to give myself an opportunity to leave. But I stayed behind. My mother, my sister, and I, we had tried escaping in Honduras multiple times before, but my father had caught us. My mom spent about 2 weeks in a hospital because my father didn't hear me whenever I said, stop. And I wonder what I had done. And I lived in Honduras for about 2 years without my mother, and at this time I actually dropped out of school. At this time I actually couldn't be in school anymore because I was too violent. So I became a kid of the streets, and I became a kid that was asking people for money, that was always begging for a piece of food because my father wasn't there. One day I remember that I went home and I went to go play soccer. And at the age of 13 years old, about 1 p.m., there's a drive-by shooting between MS-13 and 18th Streets. But this is normal. We do exactly what they taught us in school. And I really mean school, because in school we practice and we do a trial whenever what happens in the case of a drive-by shooting. What do we do in the case that your mother dies? What do you do in the case that your father gets killed? Those are the routines that we went through whenever we were in school, and it just breaks my heart because my story is not a story, but it's this story of the kids that wanted me to tell you this story. It's our story, and it breaks my heart because as we speak and as we listen and as we want to change this world, it's happening, and it breaks my heart because my heart is still broken. I'm still trying to find healing, but I find hope in your eyes, and I find passion within your eyes, and I have the idea that I'm going to go into the workforce and that I'm going to be able to say, I love you, I care about you, and it's not just about the content matter, but it's about the humanity, that it's not just about 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, but it's the idea that if you work hard, that if you are dedicated, that you are motivated, and you never quit, then you will get this. And this is me. An educated individual that can be able to provide for his family, for her family, so that we can change the world. Because our kids are not wrong whenever they say, I want to change the world. They're right. They are right. They want to change this world, but they are hitting too many obstacles that say, no, you can't. But we are that tunnel. So I lived in Honduras, and I remember, this is crazy, I remember running away. Exactly what we did. I threw myself on the floor and I started running. And as I'm running, I feel that both of my arms are sweating really hard. And I just wonder if something had happened to me. And we come to a stop, I see both of my arms, and I have been shot twice in both of my arms by gang members for simply playing soccer. So I go home to my father and I say, Father, I'm not going to be able to work tomorrow. And this is my father's word, letter by letter, just translated. Alcohol is not going to by itself. So what did I do? I banged in my arms. I grabbed my little case, and I went back to the same park to shine shoes so that I can provide for my father. And it was then whenever I made the decision that that was bull. It was then whenever I remembered that I was a little kid and that I wanted to change the world, and that maybe I wanted to be a doctor so that my mother wouldn't have to go through that again, and so that another mother wouldn't have to go through that again. And I wanted to have the idea that maybe I would be somebody that would once become a teacher. I wanted to have the idea that maybe once I could help back my country, that maybe once I could speak to teachers, that maybe once I can make my mother proud. Maybe once I can make her smile. That maybe once I can be able to tell her that every time you woke up at 3 in the morning to make tamales, mommy, it was worth it. And when I look her in the eyes and I know that her legs are hurt because of every sheer wall that she brought down. And whenever I look at her hands that are hurt, because whenever she once wanted to go to school in Honduras, her hands were burned because she was a female. And females don't get to go to school in many places. And every time I shake her hand and I say, Mommy, I love you, God bless you, I wonder what are those scars? Those are scars of battle. People that fought for us before we came here. We are not any people. People have fought a battle and a war for us to be here, and we are only the product of that. So I say thank you for being a teacher. Thank you for changing my life and for bringing that hope and just the idea that I could become somebody. So I remember that it was then whenever I made the decision to come to this nation, and it was then whenever I made the decision to run away from my father, and I took a journey to the United States by myself. Very little money and very little water, but with a lot of hope and with a lot of passion to be able to find my mother. So I came to the United States by myself, and I slept underneath trains. And I'm going to tell you about 3 things that I saw. And we can talk a little bit about more specific if you want to, but I saw little girls being raped by the coyotes on the way here. I witnessed old people be left behind in the desert because we didn't have enough water. But the thing that hurt me the most is that whenever I was riding a train, a man whose hopes were not fast enough to get on top of the train, that he got underneath the train. And as I'm witnessing, and as I'm taking this blood away from my shirt, wondering if I'm next, and I'm saying, no, I'm not a scapegoat. No, I'm not going to be the one that takes the sacrifice. No, I need to make it because there is somebody in this world that loves me, and there is somebody in this world that cares about me, and I at least need to see her once so that I can say I love you. And that was my mother. So I came to this country by myself for about 45 days. I took a very tough journey. And whenever I was in front of the Rio Grande, it gave me a flashback to 1998 whenever I was on top of the roof. And the one thing that separated my mom and myself was a river. So I threw myself in the river, not thinking that I was breaking the law, but that I was completing the law. Law of love and caring and passion, the one that I believe to be the truth. And I believe that whenever I threw myself in the river, that what I was doing was actually grabbing onto my mother's hand, knowing that everything was going to be okay, and then that I would have a chance to see my sister again. So I grabbed onto her hand, and I thought that she was going to let me go whenever the river almost swallowed me, but I was lucky enough that the immigration officer came and helped me not drown and helped me not die. So I was detained in jail for about 2 months in Harlingen, Texas. Which is really crazy because I get to be back there May 27th in the same detention center where I lived for about 2 months. And I get to talk to kids. And I get to share my story, and I get to pass around my agony, and I get to pass on your story, and to know that whenever they get out of there, that there's going to be somebody that tells them there's hope and there's light, and I am the light, because I believe that there is somebody lighting my path, and that lightness, it's education, and that's the power that you have the opportunity that my mom doesn't have, and that's to be in front of a classroom and say, I love you, and I care about you, and you are the most important thing for me. That's the reason why I and decided to go with this profession. So whenever I came to the United States, I enrolled in a middle school in Houston, Texas. And for the first time, before that, I saw my little sister in Montgomery. So I was in immigration, and for about 2 months I was there, and one day, I was not Jose Luis, I was not Zelaya, I was number 7, which later became my soccer jersey, both in high school and college. Then, you know, I got hurt and 100 pounds later, but that's not the point. So I remember being detained, and I remember one day a police officer telling me, let's go to Missouri, and I wonder if I'm about to be deported, but he just said, close your eyes and go to sleep, and maybe you'll wake up and things will be real. And as I go to sleep in the car, and he opens the door, and I wonder if I'm about to be deported, he opens another door and says, close your eyes, and as I open my eyes, there's a beautiful lady in front of me. There's a beautiful lady with a beautiful red dress and a beautiful red lipstick, and with her arms wide open saying, ven a mami, te quiero. Come to mommy because I love you. For the first time in almost 2 years, I saw my mom. Because immigration had found her, because my mom was leaving in an immigration shelter, so they found her because I knew 713. And they brought her to reunite me. And due to fear of persecution within my own nation, I was allowed to stay in the United States. So on my way to Houston, Texas, as I get there, I wonder if we got to a carnival or like maybe like, I don't know, like some place really cool because of the big towers and the airplanes, and I'm wondering if this is real, like what's going on. But I'm thinking like, where's King Kong? Like, no, I really am thinking this thing. Like I'm really like, but see, like he has to be around here. So I'm thinking if I'm gonna see like, yeah, I'm probably gonna laugh at me. I'm also yes, I don't know. I always don't know which is which, but I was wondering if I was gonna see the Ninja Turtles or the Turtle Ninjas or everything. But I was trying to be able to find these things that as a little kid I knew about the United States, and I didn't know that it would be so tough. But I didn't know that learning a different language would be so tough, because learning a different language is not just having the ability to decode and to have the ability to be able to produce language, but it's the idea to be able to learn a new culture, to be able to accept different laws, and to be able to be tolerant to different ideas and religion, and to be able to be given another presentation of life. And if you wanted, you take it, and I took it because I love this culture, because I'm thankful to this culture, and because I'm thankful to our country for opening up our arms and saying, yes, you can come in. Yes, we'll give you the opportunity for you to be somebody. And I remember that whenever I was in Houston, and they opened the door, there was a little girl about this height who opened the door. And it was December 8th whenever I saw my mother for the first time, and we were headed to Houston, and as she opened the doors, there's a little girl about this height, and she opens the door and she gives me a note, and there's a little girl with a skirt and a little balloon, and there's a guy with a beard, and there's another balloon, and there's a little kid with small shorts, and on top it said, Santa, will you bring my brother for Christmas? And then she did exactly what she did every year. She put it inside a balloon and she let it go, hoping that it would get to me. Hoping that whenever I was in Honduras that I would think of her and it worked. So I would cry to sleep knowing when I would see her again. And I remember that it was extremely tough whenever I enrolled in school, but it was very difficult having to learn a different language, and I was told that I was a nobody. I was told that I wasn't going to make it. I was told that I was stupid. I was told that I would go to jail. I was told that it was America and that I needed to learn English. And I also was told by one person that I was college material. I was told that I was beautiful and that I was smart and that I was somebody, and I didn't understand that not because I didn't know English, but because I didn't understand what that meant, because the only individual, and it's crazy because you might be like, you're over exaggerating, you sound like a movie. No, I really mean to tell you this. Very little people inspire me. And by very little people, I mean very little people. Like my students, and like my sister, and like my little brother, and like Gandhi and MLK and future president of the United States and the next women president of the United States that are going to be in our classrooms, and we get to be part of their lives. So I want to say thank you. Because people like you changed my life. So I became a teacher so that I can do exactly the same thing. And I can go back into the classroom, look in front of my students' eyes and say, you are college material. I want to look into their eyes and say that I love you the way I was loved, and I want to look into their eyes and be able to instill in them not some breath of life, but life that provides breath so that they can have some oxygen, so keep going. I want to be able to provide them an opportunity that I was provided with, the opportunity we were provided with, because that's just the first thing to do. Because somewhere I heard that we have to give by grace the same way we have received by grace. But I want to tell you very quickly a little bit about my experience in school. So I enrolled in middle school, very difficult, very challenges. I enrolled in high school. I was told my teacher that I'm not going to make it. So because I didn't understand the law, I didn't know English, and I didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer, I actually became undocumented. I actually became someone without proper documentation to be in the United States, but my dreams were bigger than any law. My dreams were bigger than any idea that I was doing something wrong, because how can something that looks so right be so wrong? So I did what I was told to do, and I was told to work hard, and I was told to do my best, and that's what I did when I graduated from high school and went to a community college and graduated with an associate's degree, and that's what I did whenever I got accepted at Texas A&M. And I went back to my mom and I said, Mommy, I'm an Aggie, and my mom went to a closet where she had clothing where she had saved whenever she was in an immigration shelter before I was in the United States. And as I give her my letter of acceptance, she cries, but I'm like, she's just being a mom. That's what moms do. That's like a description whenever you give birth. It's like, you have to sign here, you're gonna cry, yeah. So that was my mom. That was my mom. That was my mom, seriously. So I'm just like, she's just being, a mom. So, but she goes into a closet, she puts out a shirt, she gives it to me. I wish I had a picture to show you, but she gives me this shirt. And in the middle, on the sides, it's very dirty. It's holy, not as in like holy, but like really holy. And in the middle it has a heart with a maroon background that says, thank you. Even before I was in the United States, I was meant to be an Aggie. I was meant to hold an Aggie ring. My sister wanted to be a artist, but thank God she saw the light. And by that I mean me. So she's also here, she's a senior in psychology. Now all we want to do is be able to make our parents proud. I'm a graduate student, and just recently I got a phone call from Despierta America, which is like Good Morning America. And they said, hey, because I'm also the fastest crocheter in the world. I crochet to be able to pay for college. That's how I put myself in college. I literally mean I crochet like the beanies that you're wearing. I can crochet those, and I'm the fastest one in the world. If you don't believe me, Google it. I've been dead. So the fastest crocheter can do 24 stitches per minute, and I'm like, oh, let's see what I can do. My friends are like, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, let's try it. So the first video that we made, we did 37 stitches per minute. Then I got invited by the National Immigration Movement in Kansas, and they wanted me to be able to break the world record in front of people. So I was like, all right, cool. So I'll show up. so I literally show up with the hook and yarn, and I do 42 stitches per minute in front of over 600 people, and I broke the world record. But what I'm trying to say is that it's been very, very difficult. At Texas A&M, I was the first Latino that had the opportunity to give the invocation. And not only I graduated with the honors to give the invocation, I also graduated during my mom's birthday, and my stepfather's birthday, and their anniversary. And not only this kid that used to be homeless didn't have the opportunity to sit with the graduation class, I was too busy hanging out with Dr. Lofton on the platform. I was too busy asking for advice over here, and I was too busy trying to see my mom stop crying. I was too busy texting my sister, you are my inspiration. I was too busy, and whenever my name was called, it reminded me whenever I was at the immigration center, and I wondered what life would surprise me with next. So I joined grad school, and last year I had the opportunity to be the first Latino and undocumented person that ran for student body president at Texas A&M, and that gave me the opportunity to be able to be in different outlets. 14 years ago when I finished with this. 14 years ago, I lived underneath a bridge, and I wrapped myself around newspapers because it was cold. 13 years later, newspapers are wrapping my stories around their newspapers. because of you, because you gave me a chance. So please go out there, because my students want to hear one thing. And I mean it because they told me. They want to hear from you say that they are college material. And I don't mean you to lie, I mean you to say what you really believe, because I know you really do believe it. Thank you so very much for the opportunity. Thank you for saying to me that I'm college material. Thanks, and give me.
We have a few minutes for questions, so in case you have questions for either of our speakers. Comments or questions?
Julie.
Okay. How do you change things in your classroom for kids like Charles that feel like they live in their houses?
I didn't change my classroom, I changed me.
Okay.
And it had to do with my own attitudes, you know, and being able to accept my kids for who they were and recognize that they all come from a different place, and then being able to say, okay, what is it that Charles needs? This child over here was fine with the rules the way they were, but Charles wasn't always okay with the rules. So in a sense, he had his own set of rules. As long as he was doing the things I needed him to do to the best of his ability, I didn't care if he laid on the floor or if he sat, you know, on his knees in his chair. Those were things that I think it's the tendency of all brand new teachers to try to micromanage little things, like whether they're sitting up straight in their chairs or whether they're sitting on their knees or sitting on one knee and standing on one foot. And you learn that those things just, they don't matter. But with Charles, and he wasn't the only one, he was just my first one like that. It was, I had a friend one time that talked about her daughter was so difficult, and every day she started her with a clean sheet of paper. And so for Charles, it was, I had to consciously make the effort to start fresh every day, so that whatever happened yesterday didn't color how I felt about him today. Because it's easy to let those things just build up and build up and build up. And when you get frustrated, then that gets carried over. You know, the kids sense that. They sense that. They're really, really sensitive to being genuine. You know, you can't just say, oh, you're college material, and then treat them like they're not, or ignore them or something like that. So I started over every day with Charles, and you know, like, you got beside you, and there's one every year, and so yeah, that's just how I had to deal with him, was that he got to start fresh every day, which is the first day of class. So, I hope that helps. Oh, come on. You guys, you have to have questions. And your teachers, we talk. Come on. I'm glad I didn't have to go after him.
Well, we want to say a big thank you to both of you.